Hi everybody, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Brenda KB Anderson, and today I have something very exciting to share with all of you guys. I have a new book that's coming out in June, so this is like my first public announcement about my book, and I have designed a project to go along with my book. So it uses a little stitch pattern from my book, and we'll be talking about that more during this live. So you probably noticed this is the All That Zippered pouch live. So this is what we're going to be making today. Isn't it super cute? When I was thinking about this, I wanted to make something very approachable for people who are newer to color work, who've never done color work ever before. And so I wanted to come up with a pattern that was easy to work, and then also, with no shaping or anything like that, so you could just concentrate on the color work. And I also wanted it to be just sort of like an explosion of fun. I just wanted it to look really fun and be really brightly colored, and a very happy project in celebration of my book coming out. And I have to say, I have always loved the movie Romeo and Michelle's High School Reunion, and that whole genre of the 80s kind of retro throwback stuff. So this is definitely very heavily relying upon that aesthetic, you probably noticed. So it's got these bright colors, a contrasting zipper, and then a cute little heart charm, just for fun, for no other reason, for the zipper pull. And it has a lining on the inside, and we're going to be talking about that. So if sewing a lining strikes fear into your heart, you don't have to put the lining in. You really don't. This has enough structure to not have the lining. But I am going to be showing you how to do that, and it's really not very scary. You don't need a sewing machine. We're just going to do it all by hand. Watch it, and then it may change your mind about putting a lining in. This is a very straightforward project to line. So, of course, this is a live event, so I love it when you guys pop in with questions, or if you want to say hi, like good morning to Sheila. She's already said good morning to all of us, and Elaine is here too. Welcome. I'm glad that you guys are here, and I'm glad that you guys are going to be helping me celebrate the release of my book. So, and just so you know, we do have 5 copies of my book to give away. So you may have seen that in the description. There is a link, so you can click on that to enter to win one of the 5 books that we're giving away today. My book is called The Hooktionary, and it is a collection of tapestry crochet motifs. So if you don't know what that means, that's okay, because I'll explain. So tapestry crochet is a way of working with 2 colors trading off as you go. Or you can use more colors if you want, but this book, I just kept it to 2, just, kind of entry-level tapestry crochet. So it's a color work dictionary. So inside of this book, there are 150 different stitch patterns. Let me just give you a quick little flip through. So there's all these charts to work from, different stitch patterns, and you may notice that they are not particularly very traditional looking. There's a good mixture of things. I mean, there's things like telephones, hot dogs, donuts. I was a little food-centered when I worked on this book. Ninjas, saguaro cactuses. There's all kinds of different motifs that you guys can stitch up. So, and in this book, I also do talk a lot about, I talk about the 5 different stitch patterns, like the 5 different the stitches that you would use to make these color work patterns. So I use extended single crochet, split extended single crochet. If you don't know what these are, that's totally okay. Single crochet through the back loop only, which is what this project is. So we're going to be working on that today. And front post double crochet, and also center single crochet. So I talk about all those different stitch patterns. There are many other different options. If you want to do color work, you can use other kinds of stitch patterns to work up your colors. But those are my 5 favorite, and they're all included in this book. How to do those, how to fix them when you make mistakes, all that kind of stuff. So that's just a little bit about my book. So we'll move back to the All That Zippered purse, or zippered pouch, I should say. So for this project today, let's just talk about the materials first. We're going to be needing at least 2 colors of, 2 contrasting colors in order to do this color work. So then you also have the option of making, using a 3rd color for the little heart charm if you want to make that. So that's just a very small amount of yarn. All 3 of the yarns that I use, they were all the same. They're all a sport weight yarn, which is a number 2. And so it's a little bit thinner than the worsted weight yarns that I oftentimes use in these lives. It's a little bit thinner than that, but it's still manageable. It's not super tiny. And the yarn that I chose was an acrylic cotton blend, and I chose that because it's a little bit softer, but it still has enough structure to be a bag. But you could certainly swap that out. You could use wool, you could use acrylic, you could use 100% cotton, you could use, any of those in a blend would work great too. So if you just happen to have some sport weight lying around, just make sure your two colors contrast enough that you can actually see, all your hard work. All right, and then you're also gonna need a little bit of fabric if you're gonna do a lining. So in this one, you could probably hear, it's very crinkly. I used a ripstop on the inside because I was gonna be using this for a makeup bag and I wanted something that I could wipe clean, and I already had some ripstop at my house, so I used that. Then after I put it in, I thought, that's really noisy. Like, what if I'm somewhere really quiet and I need to open my bag? I don't know. I don't want everyone staring at me with the crinkles. So then I ordered some of this cloth that is a laminated cotton. So this is the wrong side of it. Here's the right side. It's got a little bit of a coating on it so you can wipe it clean, and it's fairly water resistant actually. So I'm gonna be using that in my demo today. All right, so you'll need a little bit of that. You'll also need a zipper. And I would recommend waiting to buy your zipper until after you've made your pouch, unless you're gonna be really careful about your gauge, which is fine, then you can buy your zipper at the beginning. But if you're using a different size yarn, or it's gonna be if you're not being super careful about your gauge, it might end up working up a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller than mine. You can always make a zipper shorter, but you can't make your zipper longer. So you just wanna make sure that you know really what that dimension is before you buy your zipper. All right, so good morning to Anne and Sheila who've joined us. Sheila has a question, what is ripstop? So ripstop, this is I think it's nylon, but I'm not 100% sure. It is a synthetic material, and this is most often found on things like windsocks or some kinds of flags for outdoor use. It's very slippery, and it has a very faint, I don't know if you can see, it has that very faint sort of crossing little squares that you can sort of see that makes it somehow a stronger fabric. And it's really easy to sew through. It worked out really well for this project, except I don't like how noisy it is, which is silly, but so that's why I'm not using that. But yeah, if you just even put it in the search, if you're doing search for it on Amazon or something, you'll see what ripstop looks like. It comes in a whole bunch of different colors. Yeah, and like I said, people use it for making flags or pennants or just most outdoor windsock type of projects usually. All right. Oh, yeah, Sheila's got it. Okay, excellent. So, all right, so let's start by working up. We're gonna start with a sample. We're gonna be doing it in this color, the pink and the green. So we're gonna begin with, let's see, a chain of 49 chains. Oh, and I forgot to mention, I am gonna be using a C, which is a 2.75 millimeter hook. But you can use whatever hook you need to in order to get the gauge that I listed in the pattern, or if you don't care if your bag is a little bigger or a little smaller, use whatever hook gives you a fabric that it doesn't have a ton of drape. Here's what it looks like when it's not lined. It's not super stiff, but you just don't want it to have a lot of holes between your stitches. You want it to feel fairly firm, okay? And there's nothing wrong with it being very firm, except that it might make it a little bit harder to work with your hands. So you know your body, but I just want you to make sure that you're working up a fabric that is not gonna have holes in it. You need it to have a little bit of structure, especially if you're not gonna line it. All right, so we're gonna chain 49. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49. Okay, so your piece should look about like this. Usually my first chain is just a touch longer than what it'll turn out to be. So that's about right there. And, but you know, everybody chains a little bit differently, and that's fine. And you don't have to be super, super careful about this because it's a bag, and unless you have specific things you want to put in there, and then, you know, maybe you need to be a little bit more careful so you can make sure those things fit. All right, so we're going to start with the second chain from the hook, and we're going to begin by working into the bottom of our chain. So the bottom of your chain, if you take a look at your chain here, there's a whole bunch of V's stacked up in this direction here. So they're going like this. And if you roll it over so the V's are on the table, you'll see little horizontal dashes. So we're going to be working under those across the whole chain into those back bumps. So we're going to skip the very first dash, the first back bump right there. We're skipping that one, and we're going to work underneath the next one, and we're just going to do a regular single crochet. Okay, so we insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. All right, and then we're going to continue working across. Insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. Insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. All right, so we have 3 single crochets, and we're just going to continue making those single crochets all the way across our chain. And our piece will look like this. Just a long skinny strip. So we are beginning with the bottom of our pouch here. This is the very bottom of the pouch. So we work across, and let me put my hook back in the loop here. This is where we had ended. And so at this point, after we have done this, this is what I call the setup row in the pattern. After we do this, we are going to rotate our work and start working across this side of our foundation chain. Okay, so we're going to rotate our work. This is where we had just ended with the right side facing. So we're just going to turn it like we were turning a steering wheel, and now we're going to continue working across that edge right there, the one that's looks like it's on the top right now. All right, so to start the color work section, we are going to lay a piece of the contrasting color on the edge of our work here. And as you work in tapestry crochet, you have to choose whether you are crocheting around that strand of yarn, or if you're going to let it hang to the back of your work and you're going to pick it up every once in a while or catch it every once in a while. And in this project, because I wanted the stability, I wanted it to look nice and clean on the inside, especially if you weren't going to line it, we are going to be working around the non-working color. And if that doesn't make any sense to you, you'll see me do it in just a second, and that's okay. So I'm hanging on to still the original color, the main color right here, and I have the contrasting color laying on top of where I'm going to be working. Now I'm going to start with the very first stitch, but I'm only going to be working under the back loop of it. So normally we would place our crochet hook right here under both loops, but this time we're going to be working it underneath just the back loop. So we're skipping over that front loop and placing it here underneath that back loop there. Okay, and we're going to grab our yarn. So insert under that back loop. I'm just going to pull this strand out of the way. We're going to yarn over, pull up a loop, and then because we are changing color pretty much immediately in this project to the next color, we are going to stop right there on our first stitch, and we are going to yarn over with the new color and pull through 2. So when you're working in color work like this, every time you make a stitch, if you are about to change color to the next color on the very next stitch, you need to do the last yarn over with the new color. So that'll make more sense as I stitch along. I'll explain that again if you're like, you lost me there. Okay, so we're going to be working underneath the next stitch here. We're going to insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. See how we have our new color already started. And I'm going to show you the color work chart that I'm working from right here. So inside your pattern download, which is there's a link in the description for your free pattern. So go ahead and download that, or you can download it later. I put the chart from, what I was working on when I created the sample here. And I also put another chart that's only in black and white that you'll see. And the reason that I did that was because I knew not everyone was going to be using the same colors that I'm using. And so I needed people to be able to have a way to, just use some color crayons or colored pencils or something like that to color in those squares so that they would match the colors that they have chosen. So I left a very light gray and a white so that you could do that. I know for me, some people might be able to look at the chart and say, okay, well, I'm using the yellow in place of the pink, and I'm going to use blue instead of the green, and then you can just think that in your mind. But for some reason, when I see those colors, sometimes I get confused. So I like to actually have my chart look exactly like how, the colors that I'm using. So that's why I made this second chart for you. You can choose to follow either chart, whatever makes the most sense to you. But either way, you are going to be working from the colorwork chart in order to know where to change your colors. So to work from a colorwork chart, we've already kind of started here. We started off with one green stitch on, that's our first stitch of the round. And then we switched and we moved to a pink stitch. Now you can see in this first round, so there's number 1 down here, we have 9 pink blocks in a row and then 2 more green. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to do 8 more pink stitches and then we'll switch back to our green. And once we get to the end of the chart, we're going to go back to the beginning of the same row, which is row number 1 on the chart, which is round 1 in your pattern. And you're just going to continue that, working. If you're a right-handed crocheter, you're going to work from right to left, right to left, right to left until you run out of stitches. So let me just pull this in here. So there are 4 repeats on each side of the bag, and that'll make a little more sense later once we actually turn around and start working in the round. So the other thing I wanted to mention, if there are any left-handed stitchers out there, I wrote a little bit about this in my book about being a left-handed stitcher and working colorwork charts. Because single crochet stitches are not symmetrical from side to side or top to bottom. It's not a perfect shape. It's not a perfect little square like how these are. What that means is when you are left-handed, and if you're stitching from left to right and you're working from the same colorwork chart, your stitches are not going to line up and look exactly the same as this. Now they will be in the same location, but because of the way that stitches fit together, there might be other stitch patterns that might look better than this one if you want all of your lines to go slightly to the right. Like see in this stitch pattern, the reason that I really love this particular motif in the single crochet through the back loop only is because it has all of these lines that go kind of up towards the right. If you'd been looking at a mirror image of this and they would go to the left, all the edges of it would be kind of jagged and not super crisp and clean like this. That's because the single crochet through the back loop only, that stitch is just not symmetrical from side to side, and so it has to do with how all the stitches kind of interlock. So as a left-handed stitcher, because you're going to be stitching, your stitches are the mirror image of my stitches. So the best way to approach that is to make a mirror image copy of this chart and then work it from left to right. So what you'll end up with is an exact mirror image of this. But it will look nice and clean, and your color work will look really great. But yes, there is a little more information about that in my book if you're interested. But just for the purposes of, if we have any left-handed stitchers who are going to be working on this project, I just want you to make a photocopy with the image flip-flop from side to side. So it looks like a mirror image. Or you can look at it in a mirror if you want to. Okay. So back to the colorwork chart. We've done 1 pink stitch and we're going to do 8 more. And we are going to be working around this green strand. So let me pull these 2 out of the way. Here is the green strand we were just working with right here. And we're going to lay that on top of our working row and we're going to be working around it. So we're going to insert our hook through that back loop once again. So for the rest of this project, we're going to be working underneath just that back loop. And we're going to yarn over with the new color. Here, let me move this out of the way so you can see a little better. So we'll insert our hook underneath that back loop, yarn over with the new color, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. So that's the second pink stitch. We're going to continue that. So we're working just under that back loop. We're encasing this stitch as we go. We're grabbing that pink color, yarn over, pull through 2. We're doing just a regular single crochet. The only thing that makes it different is that we are working it through the back loop, and we are making sure that we're working around that strand of yarn that's just kind of hanging out on top of the edge there, on top of our work. Okay, so just if there's anybody new joining us, just so you know, I am giving away 5 copies of my new book. It's called The Hooktionary. It's a stitch dictionary for tapestry crochet for color work. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there will be a QR code on the screen they'll lead you right to the place where you can sign up to enter to win, or there is also a link in the description, so you can click on that and that'll bring you to the right place too. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, so here is our 9th stitch. Now, if you take a look at our colorwork chart, after 9, it turns into green. So we're going to do the very last yarn over when we're working on this pink stitch. The last yarn over of this stitch prepares us to work the next stitch in green. Okay, so we've made that the last of the 9 stitches almost, but we still have to do the last yarn over. So we're going to just drop the pink yarn and pick up the green yarn and yarn over and pull through, and that changes color for the next stitch. Because when you're working in crochet, you are always creating the top of the next stitch before you actually make it. So that becomes very clear when you're working on colorwork, because if you don't switch when you need, on the stitch before, then here, I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute. Then the top of it will not match the bottom of the stitch and it'll look kind of messy. All right, so we've got these 9. We're going to be working 2 more of the green, and then we are going to repeat that row of the chart again, starting here. So we've got 1 more green stitch, and then we're going to switch back to the pink. So here's our green stitch, and this is where we would stop and switch to the pink, but I just want to show you what it looks like if you don't. So if you complete that stitch, and then you just go ahead and work the next stitch, we just drop that, and we work the next stitch in pink. You can see what happened here. This little pink guy is wearing a green hat, and that doesn't look very good. It makes it look very messy. So always make sure that on that last yarn over, you change color to the color you are about to work. All right, so let me back up here. And we are going to be switching to the pink. So on this last yarn over, we're going to switch here, yarn over with the new color, and pull through. And now we're going to do 9 stitches in pink. 1, 2. And as you work, you may have noticed me kind of finding that and pulling on it a little. As you work, you need to make sure that you kind of pull on that strand that you're not using, but the one that's just sitting on top. You gently pull on it so that you know there isn't a loop of it sticking out somewhere. And then, especially if you're newer at this and you've never done it before, I recommend tugging on your work like this to stretch out that strand that runs inside your stitches. I'll show you that again once I get some more of these pink stitches made. It'll make a little bit more sense. So we've got 3, oops, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and this is where we switch to the green. So before you yarn over with that green, you're going to want to pull on the green because there could have been a loop sticking out. You don't know unless you kind of tug on it a little bit, or as you do this for a lot, like I've made many swatches for this book and lots of colorwork projects. So I am used to kind of giving that yarn a tiny bit of a tug, and I know just how much to pull it. So as you do this over and over, it will get easier. I promise you, it will get faster. It seems like it takes forever when you first learn how to do this, and you're like, how can anyone get through this project? But after you've worked a couple rounds, you'll find you are going to be able to find those strands of yarn, pick them up a little quicker, know exactly how much to pull on the strand that's not being worked. So you just kind of tug on it a little, and then you don't want to pull it too tight, because if you do, see how it's puckering my work here and it's kind of all wiggly? That was too much. I mean, I exaggerated that, but you just don't want it to constrict your stitches. So then you just can pull them back out like that. And then you know that it's just inside of those stitches, just hanging out in there. It's not pulling. There's not too much yarn bunched up in there. You just kind of have to monitor that, especially when you're first starting to work in color work. But like I said, I promise, it gets easier. All right, so we're changing back to the green here. And see, I'm pulling on this pink just a little because that loop got a little bit long there. All right, so we're gonna do those 2 last green stitches here, and then 1 more green stitch for the beginning of the next repeat. Right there, and then we switch to the pink. Okay, Elaine says, this is a skill I really need. I am going to save and watch again. Awesome. Color work is really fun. I know, sometimes people have a hard time at the beginning because you're managing 2 strands, but you're really just picking it up and setting it down and picking it up and setting it down. And those movements, they will get quicker and it will get easier, I promise. And you don't have to, as long as you're following your chart, you can see what the stitches are. You're just placing a stitch in another stitch. You don't have to do, it's really not that complicated. It's more a matter of training your body to make these stitches and hold things a little bit differently. Because I'm kind of pinching my fabric here and letting this lay on top. I'm not actually holding that, but I guess I kind of am just a little tiny bit. I'm kind of guiding it in between my fingers there a little bit. But you'll find your own way to do it. You don't have to do things exactly the way that I do them, as long as you're getting stitches that look good. All right, let's get to 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and we're going to be switching back to the green. Okay, so you would continue working this across, and then your piece would look like this. Let's see. Here we go. Once you get to the end, well, your piece would look like this, except it wouldn't be tangled because it was in a bag. All right, so there we go. So you can see there's 4 sections of that pink, because we're going to be doing 4 repeats on each side of the bag. So you might be wondering, how are we going to start working on the other side of the bag? So we are just going to continue working. We're going to rotate our piece again and start working across this edge again. So I'm just going to remove my stitch marker, place my hook back in. So we had just finished 4 repeats of this, finished with that stitch right there. So the next stitch is green. So we've already, we've kept it with the green. So now we're just going to rotate our work, and we are going to, again, we're just working under that back loop, just like we already did. And you're placing the pink on top because you want to crochet around it. So you're going to insert your hook right here. We're not going to be working into that turning chain on the edge there. That turning chain doesn't count as anything. We're working on the stitch right there, the very first stitch on the corner. So we're going to yarn over, pull up a loop. And now we have to switch to the pink because we've got 9 pink stitches coming up here. So this might start to look a little funny here, but as you go around and around, it will make more sense, and it'll start to become the bottom corner of the bag. All right, so we're going to switch to the pink and do 9 single crochets. We are still continuing to work from row 1 of the chart, even though we are working on the opposite side of the bag. That whole row, which is really actually a round now because we're working in rounds. We're going all the way around that original foundation chain. That whole thing is going to be done from row 1 of the chart. Both sides of the bag should be identical. All right, let's see. Oh, Barbara was curious about how to deal with 3 colors rather than just 2. Okay, I'll get into that in just a minute. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I forgot to switch on my 9th one. So I'm gonna slide that back in there, pull out my loop, switch to the green, and then work a couple of green stitches here. So if you are interested in switching between more than 2 colors, I would try doing it with just 2 first to begin, but then really it isn't too much harder to do with multiple colors. It might take a little bit more yarn management though. If you are using 3 colors, what you do is you just lay the 3rd color down and crochet over it. Whatever you are not currently crocheting with, here I'll show you. Whatever you are not currently crocheting with, you're just going to crochet over. So here we've added a 3rd color. So this is just to answer the question. This is not part of the project. I'm just kind of showing you how we would add another color. And let's say we wanted to switch to the blue. We would drop the pink, pick up the blue, and pull that through. And then our next stitch could be with blue, like this. And then maybe we only want 1 stitch of blue. And then we're going to pick up the green and yarn over, pull through there, just like that. So see how I've switched between all 3 of those colors. Basically, it's the same exact theory. You're just crocheting over 2 strands, or however many strands you're using. I mean, you can do this with lots of different colors if you want. As you do that though, because you're crocheting over more and more strands, it's going to make your stitches taller and taller. So just know that. But I'm going to pull that blue out because it's not part of this project. That was just sort of a little detour. But I love curious crocheter questions, so keep them coming. All right, so let's see here. So we're still working from round 1 of the chart, and we're just going to be continuing that all the way across. So it's just barely starting to make the bottom of a bag. That very first foundation chain, that will sit right on that folded edge, and we are going to just keep working around and around, basically like in a spiral as we go up. So we'll work all the way across to the end of round 1, and that will look like this. Okay, so we have, let me back up just a second because I've already switched it to the new color and I want to explain that. Okay, so here we've worked, that was the first part of the color work we did right here on the bottom edge, and now we have worked all the way across here along the top edge, working from the chart 4 times both ways. So there's a total of 8 repeats all the way around. And here we are on the very last stitch of this row 1 of color work. So we have a green here. So if we were going to continue working, repeating this chart, we would go back to here and make another green stitch, but we're not. We're going to be working round 2. So we have already completed 1 round here, and we're going to start on round 2, and round 2 begins with pink. So when you've reached the end of that whole round, you need to look at what the color is on the next round to know what to change, what to make your yarn over with on the very last stitch of the round. So in this case, we're going to be doing that with pink. So we're going to yarn over and pull through 2. And again, we're going to rotate our work like this, and we are going to begin by making 2 pink stitches, switching to 2 green stitches. All right, so here is our first, and we are going to remember to crochet over, come back here. Remember to crochet over the non-working strand. All right, so we've got 1 pink stitch here, and then another pink stitch here. We've worked 2, and oops, on that one I was supposed to yarn over with the green, so I'm going to slide my hook back in here and pull out that last loop. And now we are working over the pink color, and there's 1 green and 2 greens, and then we're going to switch back to the pink, and then we're going to work 6 pink stitches. So 1, whoops, my green kind of pulled through there. I don't know if you saw that, but it almost looked like there was a green stitch there. That's because this stitch kind of got stuck to my yarn as I was pulling it up. So I had to pull it, that's where the pulling on your yarn kind of comes in, the non-working yarn. So as you work in color work, one thing that people often have a lot of trouble with when they're beginning is they start to have tangled up yarn. And it's really hard to avoid that when you're first learning, because you could just barely concentrate on when to switch colors, right? But once you get a little bit further down the road, you can try this from the very start too, but be kind to yourself if you forget. Every time you finish one color, you will have a designated place to put that. So for example, every time I finish with the pink, I am going to lay the pink to the front of my work. Every time I finish with the green, I'm gonna lay the green to the back of the work. Doesn't matter what one I just switched. If I'm setting down a color, pink's gonna go to the front, green's gonna go to the back. Now it could be vice versa. You could have green go to the front, pink go to the back. You just need to pick one or the other and stick to it. And that is gonna keep your yarn from tangling. I know that doesn't sound like it would, but it does. So, and see, I put the pink to the back already because I wasn't thinking. Pink to the front, green to the back. And if it does get tangled, you can reverse. You can look at the twists in your yarn. Let's see if we have some twists here, just from my yarn sitting in the bag. Maybe more of a knot from my yarn being in a little Ziploc. Okay. Let me see. I am just gonna undo this here so you can see what I mean. And this one, here, I'll just clip this. There we go. All right, so let's say you were working and your yarn was twisting like this. You can untwist it by looking at which way you need to set the yarn down in order to untwist it. I would want to keep moving it, instead of moving it to the front, because that makes it more twisty, move them to the back. So then I set the yarn to the back, no matter what color it is, set it to the back, switch colors, set it to the back, switch colors, set it to the back until it untwists itself. All right, so you will just continue working from the chart and repeating that 4 times across, switching colors on the last yarn over before you need to change colors, and you're gonna work all the way around. So this is row 2. And then I'm going to show you what that looks like when round 2 is finished. You will have a piece that looks like this. See how it's starting to turn into the bottom of the bag, starting to get that there's the very bottom crease in the bag, and it's starting to get little sides on it. And then you would continue with, after you've worked all the way around, doing 8 repeats. Then you would change your yarn on the very last stitch of round 2. It was green, and we did a yarn over with pink because that's the first color of round 3. Okay, so that's where we're at right here, placing that on my hook. And now it gets a little easier to work around those corners. When it gets taller, it's completely easy. You're just going around and around and around in a tube. It's at the very beginning when you're kind of working around that foundation chain that it gets a little bit trickier. You kind of have to move your yarn around and make sure you're really putting your hook into the right place. So on round 3, that begins with a pink stitch. Let's see. All right, and then we are going to insert our hook here. Remember to crochet around that strand that's just sitting on top. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and instead of finishing that stitch, because if you look on round 3, it immediately changes to green. So we got a switch swap and pull through with the green. And then we're gonna do 3 stitches in green. 1, 2, 3. And I wanna point out, when you're working from a color chart, there's lots of different ways of getting this kind of straight in your head so that you don't have to be looking for every single stitch, and you can kind of just look at the row all the way across and then stitch it. Look at the chart as much as you need to, but what I do is I will say numbers to myself, like in round 3, I will say 1, 3, 6, 1, 1. 1, 3, 6, 1, 1, because I can remember that much if it's a short chart like this. The other thing that really helps is to just take a moment at the beginning of every round or row and look at how the colors relate to the colors around them. Like, for example, this very first color, there's one here and it's on top of the first, that pink. It's not just, over here. The very first one is pink, and then it turns into greens, and then you just look at the shapes that it's making. So you'd stitch across, and then you might notice that there's 6 on top of 6 pink ones right here. So if you just look at your work, you can see those 6 pink ones. You know you need to put 6 pink stitches right on top of that. And then after you do those 6 pink ones, you switch from green, and then immediately switch back to pink. So you just kind of do that. Just look it over before you start working from it, at the beginning of every round. Look all the way across and see how your colors are interacting with each other, where they're, if they're making a diagonal line, or if they're directly stacked on top of the color that's the same, or, you can just kind of look at how they relate to the round that you did previously. That really helps a lot more than the numbers in your head, because that way you're going to be more aware if you make a stitch that's incorrect. So unfortunately, this stitch pattern, you can't really go back and fix it. You can kind of do like a little embroidered V on top of it, but it's never going to look exactly perfect. It's not going to completely blend in, but it's okay. It's okay to have a mistake here and there. It's a handmade thing, and we're learning, right? So all the other stitch patterns that are in my book, there are actually ways to fix them. You can fix them with crocheting on the next round, or if you miss it for a long time, you can go back and do a duplicate stitch that blends in really, really well. It's almost indetectable. But with this particular stitch pattern, it's very hard to fix unless you rip it back, which you can do. Or you can just let it go too. That is acceptable. All right, so I should have changed to the pink here, like this. All right, so then you would just continue working around and around and around, working from this chart all the way, and then you're going to repeat this chart a second time. So you worked all the way through, you get up to round 12, and then you start again at round 1. So you repeat that a total of 2 times. And then you will work one more round in the contrasting color. So you can see we started with the blue on this one. We worked 2 repeats of our color work pattern. And then at the very top, we're using the opposite color than what we used here. I mean, you can use this color if you'd like to. That's fine. This is just the one that I liked. I thought it looked a little bit better in this contrasting color. All right, so, and this is your pouch. Okay, that's really all there is to the color work section of it. Now we can talk about putting in a zipper and adding a lining. So the first thing you want to do is make your lining pattern. So actually you don't even need to make a pattern. You could just trace and cut out your lining. So I'm using this laminated cotton here, and it's folded right there. This is the folded edge right here. And I am going to place my finished pouch right here. And I should say, blocking this is probably a good idea. Just if it looks just fine to you, you don't have to block it. But if it's kind of wonky and wobbly, like this one is a little bit wider at the bottom, kind of comes in, I would steam block this one just so that it's nice and crisp and making a nice rectangle. All right, so then we are just going to trace on our doubled fabric. And I am using a marker that washes out, or actually it just fades. This one just fades. So that way, if I get a little bit of the marker on my bag that I worked so hard on, it's not going to be a big deal. It'll just fade away. So I just traced the sides and the top on my piece, and I'm going to add just a couple of pins so that it doesn't slide when I cut it out. Here, we'll add them to the outside. And one over here. And then we would just cut this out with about 1/2 inch or however much seam allowance you want. It doesn't, you could get away, you could definitely get away with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. But you know, if you've never done this before and you're really kind of unsure about your lining, just give yourself a nice 1/2 inch all the way around, especially along that top edge in case you need to adjust it a little bit. Okay. So then you just need a needle and thread, just a regular sewing needle and some all-purpose thread. I have it doubled here, so I ran it through my needle and made a knot at the very end right here. And then I'm going to begin stitching just the two sides. That's all we're stitching. And I am doing a back stitch. So, but you can do any kind of stitch you want. I'm just doing a back stitch because I feel like it is a little bit more sturdy. I'm going to insert my needle here and come out. We're just stitching right on that line that we traced. And we're going to come out a little further forward. So I'm taking about maybe almost 3/8 of an inch of a stitch here. I hope you guys can see this. I know it's kind of a stronger pattern, but maybe when we get up to this lemon, you'll be able to see it a little better. And then I'm going to go back to that halfway point between where I first inserted my needle and where I came out. Here, I'll get a little further ahead so you guys can see when I get up to that lemon what it really looks like. But basically what I'm doing is I'm taking a half a step back and a full step forward, or you can think about it as a whole step back and 2 steps forward. And this way, you don't have to take super tiny stitches, but there are, there aren't big gaps between your stitches either. Okay, we're almost to the lemon, so you guys should be able to see in just a minute what I'm doing because I've got blue thread here. I'm just going to remove that pin, and there's that purple line. I'm going to take a whole step forward, and the whole time when I'm doing this, my needle, because I'm right-handed, is always facing to the left. But if you were left-handed, it would be the opposite. Okay, so I am coming out. I came out a whole step forward, and we're going to take a half a step backward to insert our needle. And we're going to go past where our thread came out before. You can see there's the thread coming out right there. And we're going from back here to the front. And then we are going to place our needle half a step back and moving it forward. I have a question from Marie. She is wondering, because you trace the outside, how do you account for the lining being a bit larger when put to the inside? Okay, so here's the thing, is when I first started making linings for my crocheted things, I would think, oh, okay, I should make it a little tiny bit smaller so that it fits on the inside. But you know what? When I do that, it seems like it's too small and it doesn't want to reach all the way around. When I put my zipper in, I did not like how, I got a lot frustrated about that because that was kind of how I was taught to make linings, is you make the lining to be a little bit smaller than the thing that you're sewing on the outside. I come from a sewing background. And then I realized with these crochet things, even if it doesn't have a lot of stretch, just a little bit of stretch, I want my lining actually to be exactly the same size. So when I put it on the inside, it pushes out ever so slightly on my crocheted piece and makes it nice and smooth. So you don't want it to be, when you're tracing around, you're not tracing to the outside of your bag at all. You're tracing right on that folded edge, right on the very top edge. If you find, though, because we all crochet and sew differently, and maybe when you're tracing your lines, of course you can certainly take it in a little bit if you feel like it's just too big and it's making the outside stretch out too much or something like that. But I have found that this makes for me, the best lining for something that's stretchy on the outside like this, and then a woven, non-stretchy lining on the inside, is to really have it be the same size. And then this just stretches ever so slightly. This is a very, very thin fabric. So this crocheted fabric going around the outside of this, it's really not going to add that much bulk to it. So, all right. So you would just continue working this all the way across. And then, here, I'll just get over there real quick, and then we'll knot it off. And then you would sew the opposite side as well. And I do want to mention too, the little heart charm, I'm not going to be showing how to create that today because it is exactly the same pattern as my Heart of Gold earrings pattern. So I did a live for that. That is on the Creative Crochet Corner website. You can check it out. I show you step by step how to make that heart. So instead of making a red one, like in that pattern, you'll just be making it whatever color you want to make your pouch. But I just want to let you know, I'm not going to be showing that again because I've already shown that and I wanted to spend a little bit more time here with the lining and the color work and the other things that are a little bit tricky. All right, so when you get to the end, you're just going to tie a knot. I like to extend a little bit past or even up to the edge of my fabric, a little bit past that line that we drew. That just makes it a little bit easier when we place it into our bag to make a nice folded edge. All right, so, and then of course you would stitch the opposite side. So I have one that I already stitched here and I wanted to show you, because this fabric had a top side and a bottom side, actually you can see right through, this is the wrong side of the fabric, but you can see it would have looked like part of the lining was upside down if I had folded this and made it exactly the same way as this one. So I just wanted to show you, if you end up getting a lining that has, you know, it needs to be oriented a certain way, just add more seam allowance to the bottom like I did here. So you just would place your piece on there, add half-inch seam allowance around all sides, including the bottom, and then just stitch across in sort of like this U shape. All right, so I've already done that, and I am going to show you how to place the zipper inside the pouch next. So I actually have a pretty good tutorial all about zippers on the Creative Crochet Corner website if you need extra help with zippers, because I know that a lot of people will just, they'll see that a project has a zipper and they'll be like, nope, not doing that one. I do not like zippers. And that is very common. Lots of people do not like zippers because they can be kind of tricky to work with. All right, so I'm going to be placing my zipper inside here, and you can see it's a little longer, but that's okay. I'm just gonna let my zipper hang out on the inside in between my lining and the bag. That doesn't bother me because it's not that much longer. If your zipper was a lot longer, you could stitch across wherever you want your zipper to stop, stitch a whole bunch of times, and you can cut right through your zipper after you stitch it from the bottom. It's got to be zipped. All right, so we're going to be placing the zipper inside the bag, and what I like to do is, so I will start on the zipper pull end, and I'm going to place that right there on that folded edge, and then put a pin in it so I can get that in the right spot. I'm pinning through the zipper tape right now. Okay, so that's going to be there, and then I just sort of gently bring it across, and I'm going to tuck this end in as well, and this may need to be adjusted later, but I like to start out with the two ends being tucked in, or, you know, I can start on one end and work my way across either way, but I just like it, I don't like it to be flopping around. All right, so then I'm going to just pull the zipper tape down and put it inside of my bag. And I'm keeping it zipped while I pin this, so that way the sides of the bag are actually going to be in the right place. So what I want is I want the zipper teeth to be just above the edge of my crochet stitches. So I am just going to be pinning I'm trying to only pin through just that one layer of zipper. We'll see if I pin through both. So I'm going to open that up again and pin through just that one layer of the zipper. Then I'm going to tuck that end in. And pin your zipper teeth again. There should just be a little bit of zipper tape showing above the edge of your crocheted bag, because you don't want the teeth to get stuck on your crochet bag as you're zipping and unzipping. Okay, gets a little easier once you get a couple pieces pinned. And you know what? When you first start this, if you're like, ooh, I don't know if that's exactly the right spot, it's okay. Get it pinned in there, and then you can move things around. Like I can see, I think my zipper's a little too long here. I'm gonna wait for just a minute till I get the other side pinned to release that. So if you're having a lot of trouble and you're you're not able to do it in this way, you can certainly unzip. Here, I'll show you what that looks like. You can unzip your zipper as you were pinning this, and then you just will need to sort of zip it back up and check to make sure everything's in the right place later. So you can do it with the zipper open as well. I mean, there's lots of different ways to put zippers into things. But I do think it helps to watch somebody do it, because then you'll see how much kind of moving things around you actually need to do. All right, so this looks like it might be just a tiny bit long. Well, actually, maybe it's okay. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give it a nice little corner here. And just check and see if those are matching up nicely. If your zipper is wiggling like this, or if it's distorting the top of your bag, what that means is you need to use less of your zipper. You need to pull your zipper and tuck it in a little bit more and use less of the zipper pinned to your bag. Your zipper is too long, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Otherwise, vice versa, if when you're putting this in, if your bag is pulling in, that means your zipper is too short. All right, so it should look like this, where you have your teeth and then a little hair of the tape and then your crocheted fabric. And then I'm using a contrasting color here so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to just anchor this end. You can start really anywhere on the zipper, it doesn't matter where. Come in from the back. I like to start up underneath here so that my thread tails aren't in the way of the zipper teeth though. So I'm just anchoring it by doing a little stitch so that I'm able to, know that my knot's not gonna pop out. And then I'm going to take a look from the outside. I'm going to be stitching my zipper together. Now I'm going to zip it up just one more time just to make sure that it looks good. I think it looks pretty good. So I like to stitch my zipper in looking at the outside of my work. Oops. All right, so I'm going to take a little stitch just below where those V's along that top edge. Okay, I'm pulling my pin out. And I'm doing that same kind of back stitch. So I'm going in here and coming out ahead, or going in behind where I came out and then popping out ahead. Okay, so I'll go in here and take a stitch and go forward. And the whole time I'm just kind of going right along the very edge of those V's on the top of my crochet work. So on the inside, you'll see longer stitches because on the outside you're doing those little stitches like this. On the inside you'll see slightly longer stitches, but don't worry if they're not super beautiful. It doesn't matter because we're going to cover it up with our lining. That's the other awesome thing about using a lining, is you can cover up your stitches here. So that's what it looks like on the inside. And just make sure that you could try zipping and unzipping just to make sure that you are not catching the fabric when you zip and unzip your pouch. All right, and I'll do just a little bit more and then I'll show you how to get that lining in there. Okay, so you would just do that all the way around. And then you would take your lining, and if you want to, you can fold your seam allowance here like this. And maybe this is part of what I'm trying to remember. So, when somebody was asking earlier about, let's see, Marie was asking about how do you account for the lining being a bit larger when put to the inside. So maybe you were actually asking about this now that I think about it. So because you have the seam allowance sticking to the outside and your pouch is not this big, your seam allowances will just be folded on the inside. And because I'm using something that has a coating on it, I can't press this. If you were using a quilter's cotton or something, you could just press this. give it a little bit of steam, and it should stay. You could tack this, you could glue this, but I'm just going to shove this because that's my style. I'm just folding it like that, and I'm going to place it down inside the bottom. And actually, what I like to do to get these corners in the right place is I put my hand in here like this, like it's a puppet, and I just stick it inside the bag. And then from the inside, I can make sure everything is folded in the right place. You know, your seam allowance, you can split it open, fold them to either side, or fold them both to one side, which is what I have here. And you are going to be tucking underneath at least a 1/2 inch, maybe possibly a little bit more. It just depends on your bag and how carefully you traced everything. And this would actually be a good place to use those clips, those fabric clips if you have them, instead of pins, because I have this, you know, this fabric coating on here that you will probably see little tiny pinholes in it. So I'm pinning very close to my folds. But you're going to want to place the top edge of your lining needs to cover up your stitching line. I haven't stitched this side yet. There's just pins in it, but I'll get this all in so you guys can see how it looks. Let's see, where's my stitched part? Right here. Yep. So when you're folding your lining to the inside, you're going to be folding however much you need to in order for your lining to lay flat. You should start at about a 1/2 inch because that's likely going to be about right. But you can always fold more in if you feel like your lining is too long. Okay, and you're just going to be barely covering up that stitching line that you made, just barely. All right, and where's my needle? So I'm just going to do a little bit of the stitching so you can see how I do it. So of course you would have stitched your zip in all the way before you started pinning your lining in here. And I just do a little teeny tiny whip stitch around the edge. You can also do a blind stitch or a slip stitch here, but I find that it lays nice and flat if I take a tiny stitch up, place my needle into the zipper teeth, and then when I come out, I'm kind of angling down so there's just a tiny amount of that fold of fabric that's being grabbed there by the needle. Okay, so there's just a teeny tiny amount of that folded fabric. So I'm going in just above and taking a stitch from top to bottom at a little bit of an angle coming out through that fabric. And I like doing it this way because it seems like it presses the fabric downward and out of the way of the zipper, holds it nicely there. And it looks, I mean, it's really not very noticeable. And if people are looking at that instead of your gorgeous crocheted color work on the outside, well, that's just sad. Then I guess they deserve to see something, right? So you can barely even see my little stitches there. But that's what it should look like, and you just want to make sure when you're doing that that you are not stitching, you don't want to see your stitches coming out above that zipper. They should be right about, like, see, those are my stitches in my zipper right there, and I'm laying this right on that edge, right on top of it. So you should be really stitching, just barely covering up those stitches on your zipper. All right, in just a few minutes, I'm going to wrap this up. So if you guys have any lingering questions, please put them in the chat box, and don't forget to enter to win one of my books, the Hooktionary. And you know, especially if you've enjoyed this tutorial on color work, there is lots of good stuff in there. All right. So after you've stitched your lining in, if you want to add on your little heart, you would take a long strand, and this is all in your pattern. You'd take a long strand of yarn, thread it through your needle, so that way you can get it through. Here, I'm just going to pull out some of these pins so I can add this to, oops. So I can add it to my zipper tab. Get those out of the way. Here's my zipper tab. So we're going to just place our needle with our doubled yarn through here so that we have a doubled piece of yarn going straight through, right? So then we're going to twist the yarn in opposite directions. Okay, so I'm twisting one this way and one this way. Twisting, 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 twisting. I think I don't know if I tell you how many revolutions I did, but basically you're going to do so many twists that it is almost impossible to keep it from twisting back on itself. And one thing I like to do is I can kind of roll this on my legs. Especially if you're wearing jeans or something that's kind of sticky, you can kind of just roll this to twist it up. It makes it a little bit easier. All right, so now it's starting to want to twist on itself. So you can bring them together and let them untwist around themselves. So you can just pick up. Oh, I think I didn't quite twist it enough. It'll be okay. It'll be good enough, I think. I think it's just not quite as twisted as before. But basically, you want to just pick it up so that your whole bag can spin around like that. And you can see you've made a nice twisted cord. And then you can just tie this in a knot however long you want that cord to be before it gets to the heart. So let's say I wanted my cord to be about right here and attached to the heart. And then you would split this into two and stitch it into the heart. So I'll just show you one side. So you can run it in right from the top of the heart and pull it through until it gets to that knot. And then you can weave your needle back and forth. A couple of times to make sure you are actually going through. You're not just, shoving your needle through the stuffing, that you're actually kind of dragging it through some of those stitches. Like, see, it's actually really hard for me to pull this through. That's a good sign. Okay, and then you can cut that off. And then you would repeat. There we go. Then you would repeat with this other end and maybe send it through this side of the heart. So it's nice and strong because you really, you're probably going to be using this to open and close the bag a lot. So you want to make it very, very sturdy so that you don't have to fix it later, right? All right, so just we had one question here. If you wanted to make it smaller or larger, how would you adjust your stitch count across? Okay, so yes, so Sheila had this question about making it larger or smaller. So that is a really good question because you might want to be doing your own color work. Maybe you want to substitute with a different color work. Like I substituted here, this had the same stitch count, but this is exactly the same amount of stitches and everything. But if you wanted to make it bigger, what you need to do is you need to figure out your stitch repeat of whatever pattern you're working on. So this one has a stitch repeat of 12 stitches. So you'd have to add 12 stitches onto your original foundation chain. And that would give you one more repeat on each side of the bag. So when you make your foundation chain longer or shorter, if you want to make it smaller, you can subtract those 12 stitches. Whatever stitch repeat you're going to be using, whatever color work you're going to be using, you can adjust your original foundation chain. It should be a multiple of whatever that color work chart is. Like, here, let me pull this in here. So if this was your color work chart, it would have to be a multiple of 12 because you have 12 stitches across. Plus, you just add one more stitch for that original sort of beginning chain that doesn't count as a stitch or anything. So you just take how many times you want your piece, your motif repeated across, and then you take the amount of stitches per repeat, and that will give you the amount, basically the number of chains that you need for your original foundation chain. That was a very good question because this bag, you could make a very large version of this. You could make it in worsted weight. You could change how many stitches. You can make any kind of motif. I mean, you can take out a piece of graph paper and make up your own thing. I mean, you can put words on it. You can do, there's limitless possibilities here, you guys. I get very excited about color work. I'm sorry. But yes, that was a great question. I'm very glad that you asked that. Okay, and just one final reminder, you guys, make sure that if you're interested in my book, that you guys enter for the drawing. You have until April 30th, so just scan that QR code, or you can click on the link that's in the description in order to get a chance at winning one of my books. All right, I'm so super excited for you guys to be working on some color work. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll see you in my next tutorial. Bye.